"Get off!" I screamed, driving my knee upward with enough force to dent a fender. The impact was sickening, a dull, wet thud against royal anatomy. Silas, the Alpha King and Butcher of the East, froze mid-growl. His eyes bulged. He collapsed to my clinic floor, wheezing like a deflating tire. I grabbed a scalpel, terrified, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had just neutered the most dangerous warlord on the continent. I expected him to shift and rip my throat out. I expected execution. Instead, Silas rolled onto his back, clutching himself, and looked up at me with a twisted, sweaty grin. The feral rage in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dark, terrifying obsession. "Feisty," he choked out, laughing through the agony. "Welcome back to Raven's Library, Pack. You are in for a wild ride today." Quick question before we dive in. Where are you listening from right now? And do you have a furry reading buddy keeping you company? I want to hear about those pets in the comments. Also, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories just like this one, plus some exclusive badges, make sure to hit that join button and become an official member today. Now, get comfortable, because we're about to find out what happens when a chiropractor accidentally knees the Alpha King, right where it counts. Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. Crack. The sound of the T3 vertebra snapping back into alignment was louder than a gunshot in the small exam room. My patient, a massive beta wolf named Gary, let out a whimper that sounded suspiciously like a puppy begging for a treat. "Breathe, Gary," I ordered, wiping my hands on my scrubs. "And stop sleeping on the floor. You're 42, not a pup. Your spine looks like a winding road." "It's the new pack house, Dr. Kross," Gary groaned, rolling off the table. "The Alpha insists on—" The intercom in the wall buzzed. It wasn't the polite chime of a scheduled appointment. It was the frantic, distorted static of my receptionist, trembling so hard she was shaking the button. "Doctor? He's here. I couldn't stop him. I tried to tell him about the wait list, but he growled at the ficus plant." I sighed, checking my watch. "Who is here, Maddie? If it's the Gamma from the Southern Pack, tell him I'm charging double for the attitude." "No," Maddie squeaked. Oh God." Boom. The front door didn't open. It disintegrated. The sound of reinforced glass shattering echoed through the clinic, followed immediately by the screech of metal hinges being ripped from the drywall. Gary, despite his fresh adjustment, scrambled into the corner, exposing his throat in instant, pathetic submission. I didn't cower. I was too busy calculating the deductible on my business insurance. I marched out of the exam room and into the lobby. The air tasted like ozone and burning pine, the scent of an alpha on the brink of a forced shift. My waiting room was empty, save for Maddie cowering behind the desk and a figure standing amidst the ruin of my entryway. He was massive. That was the medical term for it. Broad enough to block out the sunlight, wearing a hooded trench coat that looked like it had been through a shredder. He was vibrating, his muscles locked so tight I could hear his tendons creaking from across the room. "You broke my door," I said, my voice flat. "That was tempered glass. Do you have any idea how long that takes to order?" The figure turned. He lowered his hood. He wasn't just handsome. He was a walking catastrophe. Dark hair matted with sweat, eyes glowing a toxic radioactive gold, and a jaw clenched so hard I was surprised his teeth hadn't shattered. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week and had spent that week fighting bears. He took a step toward me. The floor tiles cracked under his boot. "Fix me," he snarled. The voice was a low rumble that vibrated in my chest cavity. "I am a chiropractor, not a mechanic," I snapped, crossing my arms, And you are trespassing. Get out or I call the enforcers." He didn't stop. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, invading my personal space until all I could see was the wall of his chest. He smelled of rain, blood, and lethal power. Most wolves would have peed themselves. I just glared up at him. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his hot breath fanning over my cheeks. "The enforcers work for me, little doctor," he rasped, his eyes dropping to my lips before snapping back to my eyes. A dark, delirious smirk twisted his mouth. "And if you don't put your hands on me in the next 5 seconds, I'm going to tear this building down brick by brick just to relieve the tension." I didn't blink. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a penlight, and clicked it directly in his eye. He recoiled, hissing like a vampire exposed to the sun. Dilated pupils, excessive sweating, tremors. I listed off, clicking the light off and jamming it back into my pocket. "You're suffering from acute shift lock. Your muscles are seizing because your wolf wants out, and you won't let it. You don't need a fight, big guy. You need a nap and a muscle relaxant." I pointed a manicured finger at the exam room door. "Room 2, stripped to the waist, face down on the table. And if you break any of my equipment, I will bill you for every single screw." The Alpha King stared at me. The murderous haze in his eyes cleared for a split second, replaced by genuine, bewildered shock. He wasn't used to being ordered. He was used to being worshipped. He let out a short, choked sound. It might have been a laugh. "You're bossy," he grunted, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I think I'll keep you." "Room 2, I repeated, unimpressed. "Now." He grumbled something that sounded like a threat, but he turned and stalked toward the exam room. "Maddie," I called out, not looking away from his retreating back. "Cancel the rest of the afternoon, and call the glazier." "Dr. Kross," Maddie whispered, her face pale as a sheet. "Do you know who that is? That's Alpha Silas, the Eastern Warlord. They say he ate a beta last week for chewing too loud." "I don't care if he's the Pope of werewolves," I muttered, grabbing a bottle of heavy-duty massage oil. "He has a tilted pelvis and a bad attitude. He's just another patient." I walked into room 2. Silas was already there. He hadn't just stripped to the waist. He had shredded his shirt and thrown it in the corner. His back was a map of scars, rippling with muscle that was knotted so tight it looked like stone. I stepped inside. Click. The sound of the lock sliding home was soft, but heavy. I froze. I turned around. Silas was standing by the door, his hand on the deadbolt. He wasn't looking at the table. He was looking at me, and the playful shock was gone, replaced by a hunger that made the hair on my arm stand up. "You locked the door," I said slowly. "You said you wanted me private," Silas rumbled, moving toward me, forcing me back against the counter. "Now you have me. Fix me, doctor, before I lose control and decide that you are the only thing that looks good enough to eat." He wasn't asking for an adjustment anymore. He was hunting. And for the first time, I realized that my reflex hammer might not be enough. "Unlock it," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fact that my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Or I scream so loud every enforcer within a 5-mile radius will hear me." Silas didn't move. He leaned against the door, his massive frame blocking the only exit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, sharp shadows across his face. He looked wrecked, sweat beading on his forehead, his chest heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. "Scream," he challenged, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "They won't come in. They know better than to interrupt me when I'm agitated." "I'm not agitated," I shot back, stepping into his space. "I'm annoyed. You are a patient. This is a clinic, and you are locking me in here like I'm a snack." I raised my clipboard and slammed it against his chest. It made a satisfying thwack sound against the wall of muscle. "Now sit down before you fall down. Your cortisol levels are spiking so high I can smell the chemical burn from here." He looked down at the clipboard pressed against his pec, then back up at me. The red haze in his eyes flickered. Confusion warred with the aggression. He wasn't used to being hit with office supplies. "You hit me," he muttered, baffled. "I will do worse if you don't unlock that door and get on the table," I threatened, pointing the penlight at him like a weapon. "I have a needle in that drawer the size of a knitting needle. Do not test me, Your Highness." For a second, I thought he was going to snap my neck. The air in the room grew heavy, the static charge of his aura making the hair on my arms stand up. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. He reached behind him and clicked the lock open. "Fine," he grunted, pushing off the door. "But if you don't fix this pain in my spine, I'm taking the door with me when I leave." He stalked over to the exam table. It was a heavy-duty, reinforced steel table designed for shifters, but it creaked ominously as he sat down. "Face down," I ordered, putting on a pair of latex gloves. "And for the love of sanity, try to relax. You feel like a bag of rocks." Silas obeyed, lowering himself onto the table. His back was a landscape of violence, old claw marks, burn scars, and muscles so tense they were vibrating. I placed my hands on his shoulders, and the heat radiating off him was intense. It was like touching a car engine that had been running red hot for days. "Shift lock," I diagnosed quietly, my thumbs digging into the trapezius muscles. "Your wolf is trying to force a change to heal the stress damage, but your human side is fighting it. You're at war with yourself." He groaned, a sound that was half pain, half pleasure, as I found a particularly nasty knot at the base of his neck. "Just fix it," he growled into the face cradle. "Stop analyzing me and crack it." "I have to loosen you up first, or I'll break your spine," I retorted. "Quiet. Breathe." I began to work down his spine, using my elbows to dig into the erector spinae muscles. He was massive. Every time I applied pressure, a low, rumbling growl vibrated through the table and into my bones. It was terrifying. It was also undeniably impressive. I reached his lower back, where the tension was critical. His hips were misaligned, torqued to the left. "I need to do a lumbar roll," I said, moving to the side of the table. "I'm going to rotate your hips. It's going to be sudden. Do not fight me." "I never fight," Silas mumbled, his voice thick with pain-drunkenness. "I just win." "We'll see," I muttered. I positioned my hand on his shoulder and my other forearm on his hip. I needed leverage. I stepped in close, my thigh pressing against the table. "Deep breath in," I commanded. He inhaled, his rib cage expanding like a barrel. "And out." As he exhaled, I threw my weight into the move, twisting his spine to snap the vertebrae back into alignment. It was a standard move. I'd done it 1,000 times. But Silas wasn't a standard wolf. As soon as he felt the sudden torque, his instincts didn't register adjustment. They registered enemy. He roared. The roar shattered a glass jar of cotton balls on the counter. Before I could even finish the adjustment, Silas moved with a speed that defied physics. He didn't just resist, he exploded. He spun on the table, grabbing my wrist in a grip that felt like a steel cuff. "No!" he snarled, his eyes completely black now. The wolf had taken the wheel. He yanked me forward. I lost my footing and stumbled, crashing into his chest. He flipped us, using the momentum to slam me back onto the exam table. Suddenly, I was the one on my back, and 260 pounds of feral Alpha King was looming over me, pinning my wrists above my head with one hand. His other hand was on my throat, not squeezing, but holding me there, claws extended, just pricking the skin. "Enemy," he hissed, saliva dripping from his bared fangs. "Assassin." "Patient!" I yelled back, staring straight into the abyss of his eyes. "I am your doctor, you moron!" He didn't hear me. He was lost in the shift lock haze. He leaned down, sniffing my neck, his growl vibrating against my jugular. He was going to rip my throat out. I could feel the intent. He was seconds away from painting the walls with my arterial spray. I couldn't overpower him. I couldn't reason with him. So I did the only thing a girl from the rough side of the Packlands could do. I stopped struggling. I went limp for a fraction of a second, letting him think he had won. He shifted his weight, settling his hips between my legs to anchor me. Mistake. "Get off!" I screamed. I brought my right knee up. I didn't hold back. I put every ounce of my strength, every frustration with my insurance premiums, and every bit of fear into a single kinetic strike. My knee connected with the royal groin with a dull, sickening thud. The effect was instantaneous. Silas didn't roar. He didn't growl. The air simply left his body in a high-pitched wheeze that sounded like a deflating balloon. His grip on my wrists vanished. His eyes bulged so wide I thought they might pop out of his skull. He collapsed, rolling off me and crashing onto the linoleum floor in a heap of twitching muscle. I scrambled off the table, grabbing a scalpel from the tray, my chest heaving. I backed into the corner, weapon raised, waiting for the retaliation, waiting for death. The room was silent, save for the sound of the Alpha King, the butcher of the East, the warlord of the territories, curled into a fetal ball, clutching his crotch and gasping for air. "Oh God," I whispered, the adrenaline crashing. "I just neutered the king." I watched him, terrified. Was this treason? Was this a declaration of war? I started mentally calculating how fast I could pack a bag and flee to Canada. But then the wheezing changed. It deepened. It rattled. Silas rolled onto his back. His face was a mask of agony, turning a lovely shade of purple. But his eyes were locked on me. And they weren't black anymore. They were gold again. A strangled sound escaped his throat. He coughed, blinking away tears of pain. Then a twisted, sweaty grin spread across his face. "Feisty," he choked out, his voice an octave higher than usual. He took a jagged breath, let his head thunk back against the floor, and laughed. A dark, breathless laugh. "Do it again." I lowered the scalpel slightly. "Excuse me?" "You," he pointed a shaking finger at me. "You're the first person in 10 years who hasn't pissed themselves when I growled." He groaned, shifting his legs gingerly. "I think you ruptured something, but the rage is gone." I blinked. He was right. The oppressive, heavy aura of the shift lock had vanished. The shock of the pain had rebooted his system like a hard slap to a malfunctioning computer. "You're welcome," I offered, unsure if I should stab him or offer him an ice pack. Chapter 4. Silas lay on the floor for another full minute before he tried to move. When he finally sat up, he winced, his hand still hovering protectively over his lap. "You have a dangerous knee, doctor," he rasped, using the exam table to hoist himself up. "You attacked me," I said, my voice shaking slightly but regaining its edge. "I defended myself. That's standard protocol. You're lucky I didn't use the scalpel." He looked at the small blade in my hand, then up at my face. His gaze was intense, stripping away my defenses. There was no anger in it, just a terrifying amount of focus. "I tried to kill you," he stated matter-of-factly, "and you put me on the floor. Efficient." He stood fully upright. The pain seemed to have grounded him. He wasn't vibrating anymore. He was just big and very, very present. "Finish it," he said. I stared at him. "Finish what? The assault?" "The adjustment," he said, turning around and presenting his back to me. "You didn't pop the hip. It's still out. And now my balls hurt, so you owe me." I couldn't believe it. The audacity. "Get on the table," I sighed, dropping the scalpel back onto the tray. This time he didn't fight. He lay down, but I could feel his eyes watching me in the reflection of the metal cabinet. The tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't predatory anymore. It was heavy, thick. I placed my hands back on his hips. "This is going to hurt. Again." "Do your worst, Beatrix," he murmured. He knew my name. I hadn't told him my name. I frowned, but I focused on the job. I lined up the joint again. "Breathe in." He breathed. I twisted. Crack! The sound was wet and loud. Silas let out a long, low groan, not of pain, but of pure, unadulterated relief. His entire body went slack on the table. "Better?" I asked, stepping back and wiping my hands. He stayed there for a moment, face down, breathing into the leather. Then he pushed himself up. He rolled his shoulders, testing the movement. "Much," he said. He turned to face me. He didn't bother covering up. He just stood there, shirtless, scarred, and radiating power. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a black credit card made of metal. He tossed it onto the counter. It clattered loudly. "Keep it on file," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow." "I'm fully booked tomorrow," I lied. I wanted him as far away from my clinic as possible. Silas walked toward me. He didn't stop until he was looming over me again. He reached out, and for a second, I flinched. But he just tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were rough, calloused, and surprisingly gentle. "Cancel them," he whispered. "I don't like sharing my toys." "I am not a toy," I snapped, slapping his hand away. "I am a doctor." He smiled. It was a real smile this time, dangerous, possessive, and devastatingly handsome. "We'll see." He turned and walked out the door. I slumped against the counter, letting out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the credit card. It was black titanium. It had no numbers, just the royal crest embossed in gold. I heard a commotion outside. I ran to the waiting room window. Silas was climbing into a massive armored SUV. But he hadn't left alone. Standing outside my clinic, in perfect formation, were 6 royal guards. They were dressed in tactical black armor, holding assault rifles. One of them was already unrolling royal property tape across my front lawn. Another guard was nailing a sign to my front door. I squinted to read it through the shattered glass. By order of the king, Dr. Kross is under exclusive contract. Trespassers will be mauled. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. See you tomorrow, Feisty. Wear comfortable shoes. I looked at the guards. I looked at the shattered door. I looked at the text. I need a lawyer, I whispered to the empty room. And a shotgun. Chapter 5. You are losing me money, I hissed, slamming my palm against the polished mahogany of the hotel suite door. Do you know how much a missed appointment fee is? Do you care? No, because you probably print your own currency. The 2 guards outside the penthouse suite exchanged nervous glances. They were 7 feet tall, armed with automatic weapons, and looked terrified of me. Not because I was scary, but because I was screaming at the door of the most dangerous predator on the continent, and they didn't know if they should shoot me or offer me a breath mint. Ma'am, the king is in a war council, the guard on the left muttered, shifting his weight. Level 1 clearance only. We really can't. I didn't wait. I kicked the door, hard, right near the lock. It didn't open, obviously. It was solid oak, but it made a loud enough thud to register. Silas! I yelled through the wood. I know you can hear me. Your hearing is 400 times better than a human's. Open up, or I'm adding a nuisance tax to your bill. The door swung open instantly. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stormed in, marching past a stunned valet and straight into the main living area. It wasn't a living room. It was a command center. A massive digital map of the territories hovered above a central table. Around it stood 5 generals, men and women with scars, medals, and killing auras so potent the air tasted like copper. They all stopped talking. 10 eyes locked onto me. And there, at the head of the table, sat Silas. He was wearing a black tactical shirt that clung to him like a second skin, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms thick with muscle and ink. He looked up from a dossier, his expression dark and lethal. Until he saw it was me. The darkness vanished, replaced by that infuriating, lazy amusement. Dr. Kross, he drawled, leaning back in his chair. To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you miss me? Miss you? I marched right up to him, ignoring the generals who were now reaching for their sidearms. I can't miss you when your goons are blockading my clinic. I have Mrs. Gable's sciatica treatment at 2, and she couldn't get past the blockade because your guard said she was a potential threat. She's 84, Silas. She walks with a cane. I stopped directly in front of him. He was sitting, which put us at eye level. Call them off, I ordered. The room went dead silent. A female general with a jagged scar across her eyes stepped forward, her hand on her knife. Watch your tone, civilian, she snarled. You are addressing the king. I am addressing a patient with a misalignment in his lumbar spine and a serious boundary issue, I snapped, not even looking at her. My focus was entirely on the monster in the chair. I reached out, my finger extending like a weapon, and I poked him, hard, right in the center of his chest. You move your guards. Poke, poke, poke. The generals gasped. The sound of weapons being drawn filled the room. But Silas didn't flinch. He looked down at my finger digging into his pectoral muscle, then back up at my face. His eyes were glowing that molten gold again. "Or what?" he asked softly. The rumble in his chest vibrated against my fingertip. "Or I fire you as a patient," I bluffed, "and you can go back to being a crippled, angry tyrant who can't turn his head to the left without whimpering." Silas stared at me for a long, heavy second. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then, slowly, he raised his hand. He didn't strike me. He wrapped his large, warm hand around my finger, capturing it against his chest. "Stand down," he commanded the generals, his voice dropping an octave. "Leave us." "But sire," the scarred general protested. "Out!" The command slammed into the room like a physical force. The generals scrambled, gathering their maps and fleeing the suite like schoolchildren escaping a fire. When the door clicked shut, we were alone. Silas didn't let go of my finger. He pulled me closer, tugging me until I was standing between his spread knees. "You have no survival instinct, do you, Beatrix?" he murmured, his thumb grazing my knuckle. "I have a business to run," I said, trying to ignore the heat radiating off him. "Your guards are bad for business." "My guards are there to keep you alive," he countered. "You hurt a king. My enemies will think you're an assassin, or worse, a weakness. If they get to you, they get to me." "I can take care of myself," I said, trying to pull my hand back. He held tight. "I know," he grinned, his eyes dropping to my knee. "I'm still bruised." He leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "I'll move the guards to the perimeter," he offered. "Invisible. Out of sight. Mrs. Gable can get her treatment." "Good," I said, breathless. "On one condition," he added. "I don't make deals with terrorists," I said automatically. "You treat me every day," Silas whispered. "Private sessions. No guards in the room. Just you, me, and that table. I need to know that the woman who put me on my knees can keep me there." He finally released my hand, but the phantom warmth of his touch lingered. "Deal?" he asked. I looked at him, arrogant, dangerous, and looking at me like I was the only water in a desert. "Fine," I said. "But if you growl at me again, I'm charging you for emotional damages." Chapter 6. The next day, Silas arrived at the clinic exactly at noon. True to his word, the guards were invisible. But Silas himself was impossible to miss. He filled the room. He wasn't just big, he was loud in a sensory way. He paced around the small exam room, touching everything. He picked up a model of the human spine, flexed it until it snapped, frowned, and put it back. "Sit down," I said, pointing to the table. "You're making me nervous." "I'm agitated," he admitted, dragging a hand through his hair. "The council is pushing for war with the West. My wolf wants to hunt. Sitting still feels like itching." "It's the shift lock," I said, washing my hands. "Your adrenaline is spiking, but you're not burning it off. You need to be immobilized so your parasympathetic nervous system can take over." He paused, looking at me with a raised eyebrow. "Immobilized?" "Restrained," I corrected, opening the bottom drawer of my cabinet. I pulled out the leather straps. These weren't the flimsy things you buy online. These were medical-grade, reinforced leather restraints with steel buckles, designed to hold a shifting beta during a seizure. I held them up. Silas went still. His eyes darkened, shifting from gold to black. He looked at the straps, then at me. "You want to tie me up," he stated flatly. "Your safety," I said, keeping my voice clinical. "If you start to shift mid-adjustment, you could hurt yourself. Or me. These will keep you grounded." It was a lie. Mostly. I knew he wouldn't hurt me intentionally, but his energy was chaotic today. I needed him to submit to the process. I needed to be in charge. Silas walked over to the table. He ran a hand over the leather straps I had laid out. "Do you know how many people have tried to put me in chains, Beatrix?" he asked quietly. "Armies. Assassins. My own father." "And?" I asked, challenging him. "I killed them all." He looked up, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "But for you..." He hopped onto the table and lay back, extending his wrists. "I might make an exception." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I walked over and secured the first strap around his left wrist. I pulled it tight. Click. He didn't flinch. He watched my face. I moved to the other side, his right wrist. Click. Then his ankles. When I was done, the King of the East was spread eagle on my exam table, completely at my mercy. He tested the restraints, flexing his massive biceps. The leather groaned, the steel buckles straining, but they held. "Tight," he observed, his voice rough. "Necessary," I said, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The sight of him, bound, powerful, and yielding, was doing things to my heart rate that I couldn't explain medically. I moved to the head of the table. "I'm going to work on your neck. Don't move." "I can't," he pointed out, tilting his head back to look at me upside down. I placed my hands on his jaw and the base of his skull. His skin was burning hot. "Relax," I whispered. "Make me." I applied pressure to the suboccipital muscles. He let out a long, ragged breath. I could feel the tension bleeding out of him, replaced by something heavier, something darker. "You like this," I realized aloud, my thumbs digging into the cords of his neck. "You like being helpless." "I'm never helpless," Silas corrected, his eyes closing. "But I am tired of being in control. Every second of every day, I have to be the king. I have to hold the monster back." He opened his eyes. They bored into mine. "With you, I don't have to hold anything. You hold me." The vulnerability hit me harder than his anger ever could. I looked down at him, this weapon of a man, voluntarily shackled in my clinic. "I've got you," I whispered. I leaned in to adjust his cervical spine. My chest brushed against his forehead. He inhaled sharply, smelling me. "Beatrix," he warned, his voice straining against the leather. "If you don't crack my neck in the next 3 seconds, I'm going to break these straps and show you exactly what happens when I lose control." "Is that a threat?" I asked, positioning his head for the thrust. "It's a promise." Crack. "Emergency. Code red. Bring the kit." The text from Silas came at 7 p.m. on a Friday. My stomach dropped. Code red meant blood. It meant organs on the outside. I didn't even change. I grabbed my trauma bag, threw on my coat over my scrubs, and sprinted to my car. I drove like a maniac to the address he sent, blowing 2 red lights. I was expecting a battlefield, a safe house, a ditch. I arrived at the Grand Hotel ballroom. Valets in red vests were parking Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. Women in glittering gowns were gliding up the stairs. I screeched my beat-up sedan to a halt in the VIP lane, jumped out with my bag, and ran past a horrified doorman. "Medical emergency!" I shouted, flashing my hospital ID. "Move!" I burst through the double doors of the ballroom, scanning the crowd for a body, for blood. Instead, I found Silas. He was standing in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly, it should have been illegal. He looked devastating and completely, utterly unharmed. He spotted me. A slow grin spread across his face. "You made good time," he said, as I stomped up to him, breathless and wild-haired. I dropped my heavy medical bag on the floor with a loud thud. The music stopped. People stared. "Where is the blood?" I demanded, poking him in the chest again. "Where is the dismembered limb? You said code red." My back felt a little tight, Silas shrugged, sipping his drink. "And I hate these parties. I needed a distraction." "I am a doctor," I screeched, ignoring the gasps of the socialites around us. "Not your emotional support animal. I ran 3 red lights." "And you look ravishing," Silas said, looking me up and down. I looked down at myself. I was wearing oversized blue scrubs, combat boots, and I had a stethoscope hanging around my neck. I looked like I had just escaped a shift in the ER, which I had. "I hate you," I hissed. "I am leaving." "You can't," Silas said, stepping closer. "You're my date." "I am in scrubs." "It's a bold fashion statement. I like it." Before I could murder him, a shadow fell over us. Well, a voice sneered. "I didn't know the king had a pet veterinarian." I turned. Standing there was a man who was clearly an alpha. He was almost as big as Silas, but where Silas was lean muscle, this guy was bulk, bloated. His suit was straining at the seams, and his face was red. "Alpha Cade," Silas greeted, his voice dropping to a growl. "Careful." "What is she?" Cade laughed, gesturing to my boots. "Your cleaner? Did you pick her up from the pound?" Silas moved. It was a blur. He was going to rip Cade's throat out right there on the parquet floor. "No!" I barked. I stepped in front of Silas, placing a hand flat on his chest. "Heel!" Silas stopped. He vibrated with rage, but he stopped. I turned to Alpha Cade. I looked him up and down, putting on my best disappointed doctor face. "Alpha Cade, is it?" I asked sweetly. "Who are you supposed to be, little girl?" he sneered. "I'm Dr. Kross," I said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "And judging by the excessive sweating, the erratic pupil dilation, and the distinct kyphotic curve of your upper spine, I'd say you're suffering from steroid-induced adrenal failure." Cade froze. "What?" I stepped closer, tapping his bloated bicep. "That's not muscle, honey. That's water retention. And your posture? You're compensating for a weakened pelvic floor. Tell me, do you have trouble holding your bladder when you sneeze?" The crowd went silent. Someone in the back snickered. Cade turned purple. I will." "You'll what?" I interrupted, tilting my head. "Burst a vessel? You're a stroke waiting to happen. Go eat a salad and do some Kegels. You're embarrassing yourself." Cade opened his mouth, closed it, looking at the laughing crowd, and then turned and stormed off. I turned back to Silas. He was staring at me. His champagne glass had shattered in his hand, but he didn't seem to notice the blood dripping from his fingers. He looked like he had just seen God. "You," he whispered, "are magnificent." "I'm billing you for the consultation," I grumbled, grabbing a napkin to wrap his hand. And for the gas money. Beatrix, Silas said, grabbing my wrist and pulling me close, ignoring the blood. Marry me. Shut up, I said, checking his palm for glass. You're bleeding on the floor. It's unsanitary. I'm serious, he murmured, leaning down to my ear. I'm going to keep you. Hold still, I ordered. But as I wrapped his hand, I felt it. The pull, the electricity, and the realization that the danger wasn't the rival Alpha. It was the man looking at me like I was the only thing in the world worth conquering. Chapter 8. You are burning up, I muttered, stripping off my latex gloves and tossing them into the bin. Your body temperature is 104. If you were human, your brain would be boiling in its own fluid. Silas didn't answer. He was face down on my table again, his breathing ragged and wet. We had left the gala 2 hours ago, speeding back to the clinic in complete silence. He hadn't said a word, but the air in the car had been so thick with pheromones and aggression, I had to roll down the window just to think straight. It's the shift lock, he gritted out, his voice muffled by the leather face cradle. My wolf is clawing at the walls, Beatrix. He wants to break something. He wants to break you. He can try, I said, grabbing a bottle of cooling gel. But I have a sedating dart in my pocket, and I'm not afraid to use it. I wasn't afraid. That was the problem. I should have been terrified. The man on my table was a biological weapon. His muscles were so hard they felt like steel cables under his skin. He was vibrating with a lethal energy that made the instruments on my metal tray rattle. But instead of fear, I felt gravity. I felt pulled toward him. I need to work out the knots in your lower thoracic, I announced, pouring the icy blue gel onto my hands. But my thumbs aren't strong enough to penetrate this muscle density. You're like a brick wall. Use your elbow, Silas suggested, a dark amusement coloring his pain. I'm going to use my knees, I corrected. I need leverage. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped onto the small stool next to the table and climbed on top of him. I straddled his hips, settling my weight onto his lower back. Silas let out a sound that was half groan, half growl. His hands clenched the sides of the table so hard the metal groaned in protest. Careful, doctor, he rumbled, the vibration traveling straight up through my thighs. You are sitting on a loaded gun. Quiet, I ordered, though my own heart was hammering. Focus on your breathing. I leaned forward, using my body weight to drive my forearms into the massive muscles flanking his spine. It was intimate, too intimate. My chest brushed against his back with every compression. The smell of him, sandalwood, rain, and raw masculine heat filled my nose. You smell like distress, Silas whispered, his voice straining. And desire. I smell like antiseptic and annoyance, I lied, digging my elbow into a particularly nasty knot near his shoulder blade. He hissed, his back arching instinctively against my weight. It was a power struggle, a dance of dominance and submission disguised as medical treatment. He fought the relief. I forced it on him. I worked my way down his spine, sweating from the exertion. As I reached his lumbar region, right above the waistband of his ruined suit trousers, I saw it. It was small. A discoloration. At first, I thought it was a bruise from where I'd kneed him weeks ago, a memory that still made him smirk. But as I wiped away the excess gel, I realized the skin wasn't purple. It was black, a network of dark spiderweb veins radiating from a tiny, almost invisible puncture mark. I stopped. My hands hovered over the spot. Silas, I said, my voice dropping the doctor affect. How long have you had this pain in your lower back, specifically on the right side? Weeks, he mumbled, his head turning slightly to look at me. Since before we met. Why? I leaned closer, sniffing the wound. It was faint, masked by his own potent scent, but it was there, the smell of rotten eggs and bitter almonds, sulfur, and wolfsbane. This isn't shift lock, I whispered, horror cold in my stomach. Your muscles aren't seizing because of stress, Silas. I climbed off him, my boots hitting the floor with a thud. I grabbed a pair of forceps and a swab. Don't move, I commanded. Beatrix? He started to push himself up. I said don't move, I snapped, panic sharpening my tone. You have a necrosis spreading on your L4 vertebrae. Someone didn't just hurt you, they're actively killing you. Chapter 9. Poison, Silas repeated, sitting up on the table. He didn't look scared. He looked insulted. That's impossible. My food is tasted. My drink is tested. I am the Alpha King. My metabolism burns through cyanide like it's sugar. This isn't cyanide, I said, shoving the swab into a test tube and capping it. And you didn't eat it. You were injected, probably with a microneedle, small enough that you wouldn't feel it through the hide of your shift. I marched to my lab station in the corner of the room, jamming the sample into the analyzer. It's a localized neurotoxin, I explained, typing furiously on my keyboard, laced with concentrated wolfsbane and something else, something synthetic. It's designed to overstimulate your adrenal glands. It mimics shift lock. The machine beeped. A red graph spiked on the monitor. See this? I pointed at the screen, though I knew he was looking at me, not the data. It's keeping your wolf in a state of perpetual fight or flight. It's driving you insane, Silas, literally. If we don't flush this out, your brain will snap. You'll go feral, and the council will have to put you down like a rabid dog. Silas went silent. The air in the room grew heavy, the temperature dropping as his aura shifted from hot rage to cold, calculating fury. Who? He asked. One word. A death sentence. I don't know yet, I said, spinning around to face him. But whoever it is, they have access to you. Close access. Someone who can get close enough to stab you in the back without you noticing. Silas stood up. He grabbed his shredded shirt, ignoring the buttons, and pulled his trench coat over his bare chest. I'm leaving, he stated. Excuse me? I blocked his path. You are absolutely not leaving. You are a walking time bomb. I need to start a dialysis protocol immediately. I need to synthesize an antidote. My enemies are in the palace, Silas growled, stepping toward me. If there is a traitor in my inner circle, I need to find them before they strike again. If you leave now, the adrenaline from the hunt will accelerate the toxin, I argued, poking him in the chest again. You won't make it to the palace. You'll shift in the car and tear your driver apart. He grabbed my hand, stopping the poke. I will not hide in a clinic while my kingdom rots. You will if you want to live to rule it. I yanked my hand back. I turned and hit the red button on the wall. Clang, clang, clang. Steel shutters slammed down over the windows. The magnetic locks on the front and back doors engaged with a heavy thud. The biohazard containment lights flashed orange. Silas looked around, unimpressed. You think a few shutters can hold me, Beatrix? Those are reinforced titanium, I bluffed, and the ventilation system is currently pumping a mild sedative into the room. So yes, I think they can hold you long enough for me to save your life. It wasn't titanium. It was aluminum, and the ventilation was just air conditioning, but he didn't know that. Sit down, I ordered. Silas glared at me, his jaw ticked. For a moment, I thought he was going to test the shutters. Then he let out a short, sharp exhale through his nose. "You are infuriating," he muttered, sitting back down on the edge of the table. "I am efficient," I corrected. "Now give me your arm. I need a baseline blood draw." I moved toward him with a tourniquet. The tension was still there, buzzing between us, but he offered his arm. Just as the needle pierced his skin, the clinic went black. Not just the lights, the analyzer, the hum of the fridge, the backup generator didn't even kick in. Pitch darkness. "Beatrix." Silas's voice came from the dark, low and urgent. "Get behind me." "It's just a fuse," I whispered, though my heart stopped. "My equipment draws a lot of power." "No," Silas growled. "I can hear them. Tires on the pavement, heavy boots, 15 men." Then came the sound. Click, whirr. The electronic locks on the doors were disengaging. They cut the power to kill the mag locks, I realized, freezing. "They're coming in." Chapter 10. "Who knows we're here?" Silas demanded. He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed me by the waist and hauled me off my feet, moving us into the corner of the room, away from the door. His body was a shield, hard and unyielding in the dark. "No one," I whispered, clutching his coat. "My appointments are encrypted. Unless they tracked me," Silas finished grimly. "The traitor." The front door of the clinic crashed open. I heard glass crunching under boots. Voices. Not the stealthy whispers of assassins, but loud, chaotic shouting. "Did you see the car? It's the royal SUV! Is he in there? Get the shot! Get the shot!" I frowned. That doesn't sound like a hit squad. Silas stiffened against me. "Cameras." "What?" "The press," he snarled, a vibration building in his chest that felt like an earthquake. "They aren't here to kill me. They're here to expose me. If the kingdom sees me like this, sweating, shaking, weak, the council will vote no confidence by morning. It's a coup by humiliation." A bright beam of light swept through the hallway, illuminating the dust motes. "King Silas, are you in there? Is it true you're suffering from madness?" a reporter shouted. The flash of a camera strobe went off like a lightning bolt. The effect on Silas was catastrophic. The sudden light, combined with the toxin and the threat, shattered his control. Roar! The sound that tore from his throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a beast in a trap. His bones cracked audibly as his shoulders broadened, shredding the trench coat. He was shifting. Here, now. If he shifted, he would slaughter everyone in that lobby. The reporters, the innocent bystanders, and then he would be executed for it. "Silas, no!" I yelled, grabbing his face. He didn't recognize me. His eyes were glowing so bright they illuminated the room. He bared his fangs, ready to charge the door. I didn't think. I tackled him. I threw my entire weight against his midsection, driving him sideways. We crashed through the door of the supply closet. I kicked it shut behind us and threw the deadbolt, just as the reporters swarmed the exam room. We were plunged into total, suffocating darkness again. The closet was tiny, filled with mops and boxes of gauze. We were pressed together, chest to chest, tangled in a mess of limbs. Silas was thrashing, growling, fighting the shift. "Let me out," he snarled, his voice distorted, guttural. "Kill. I will kill them." "No killing," I panted, pinning his wrists against the wall. He was strong enough to throw me through the drywall, but he was holding back, just barely. Silas, listen to my voice. Ground yourself. It burns, he roared, his head thrashing. Focus on me, I ordered. I pressed my body flush against his, trying to use the contact to anchor him. My hands framed his face, my thumbs stroking his cheekbones. I am here. You are safe. You are not a monster. You are a king. My king. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Silas froze. The growling stopped, replaced by heavy, jagged panting. In the dark, I could feel the heat radiating off him, soaking through my scrubs. Yours, he rasped. The word was a question and a claim. Mine, I whispered fiercely. So don't you dare embarrass me by eating a paparazzi photographer. He let out a shuddering breath. The cracking of his bones subsided. He wasn't shifting anymore, but the adrenaline hadn't left. It had just changed direction. Beatrix, he groaned. He lowered his head. His nose brushed against my neck, inhaling deeply. Then he moved up. His mouth found the palm of my hand, which was still pressed against his cheek. He didn't kiss it. He licked it. A long, slow, rough stroke of his tongue against my sensitive skin. I gasped, the sound loud in the tiny space. My knees went weak. You taste like control, he murmured against my palm, his other hand moving to grip my hip, fingers digging in possessively. And I think I'm addicted. Silas, I breathed, my voice trembling. We are in a broom closet. I don't care, he growled, pulling me harder against him until I could feel every inch of his arousal. You stopped the shift. You realized what that means? That I'm a good doctor? No, he whispered, his lips grazing my ear. It means you're my mate. And if you don't open this door right now, I'm going to take you against this shelving unit. Chapter 11. Open the door, Silas commanded, his voice rough with a mix of lust and command. Or I will kick it down. If you kick it down, you'll hit the reporter from the Daily Howl in the face, I whispered, pressing my ear to the wood. Wait, listen. The chaos outside had shifted. The clicking of cameras had been replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thud of military-grade boots. A voice, smooth, polished, and terrifyingly familiar, cut through the noise. Clear the room. This is a medical emergency. The king is unwell. Anyone who publishes a photo of this will be charged with treason. Silas stiffened against me. Kale. Your beta? I asked, looking up at him in the dark. My brother in arms. Silas exhaled, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders. We're safe. Open it. I hesitated. My gut was twisting, and it wasn't from the adrenaline. Something was wrong. The timeline didn't fit. The press had arrived before the security breach was detected. Someone had tipped them off, and Kale had arrived seconds later to clean up. Silas, I said, my hand landing on the pocket of his ruined trench coat. Wait. My fingers brushed against something hard and metallic in his pocket. A flask. I pulled it out. It was silver, engraved with the royal crest. I unscrewed the cap and sniffed. The smell hit me like a physical slap. Rotten eggs, bitter almonds, and the distinct metallic tang of synthesized neurotoxin. This is it, I whispered, my blood turning to ice. The source. It's in your flask. I don't drink from that. Silas frowned, confused. Kale gave it to me this morning, said it was a protein blend for the stiffness. The lock on the closet door clicked. I didn't have time to explain. The door swung open, flooding the closet with harsh light. Standing there was a man who looked like a catalog model for Traitor's Weekly, blonde, perfectly groomed, and wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him were 6 armed guards. "Sire!" Cale gasped, feigning shock. "Thank the goddess! We thought you were compromised." His eyes flicked to me. The smile vanished. "Step away from the king, witch." "It's him," I said, shoving the flask into Silas's chest. "Silas, smell it. It's the poison. Cale gave it to you." The room went dead silent. Silas looked down at the flask, then up at his best friend. His expression was a mask of confusion. The toxin was still clouding his mind, making him paranoid, slow to process. "Cale?" Silas rasped. Cale didn't flinch. He looked at the flask, then looked at the guards with a tragic expression. "I see," Cale sighed. "She's desperate. Sire, we found the lab results in her coat. She's been synthesizing the toxin here. She's been keeping you sick to ensure you keep coming back, to control you." "Liar!" I screamed, stepping forward. "Check the timestamps on the blood work. I just found it." "She's seducing you, Silas," Cale pressed, his voice hypnotic. "Look at you. You're in a broom closet with a civilian while your kingdom burns. She has bewitched you." Silas looked at me. His eyes were wide, gold swirling with black. He looked at Cale, the man who had fought beside him for decades. Then he looked at me, the woman who had kneed him in the groin 3 weeks ago. He hesitated. That was the knife in my heart. He didn't immediately rip Cale apart. He looked at me with doubt. "Silas?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Arrest her," Cale ordered. The guards moved. I didn't wait for Silas to make the right choice. He was compromised. I was on my own. I grabbed a glass beaker of ammonia from the shelf next to me and smashed it onto the floor. Then I grabbed a bottle of bleach I used for cleaning the floors. "Don't breathe!" I yelled, splashing the bleach into the puddle of ammonia. Chloramine gas. Nasty stuff. A cloud of white, stinging gas erupted instantly. The guards coughed, blinded. Cale gagged. "Beatrix!" Silas roared, reaching for me through the smoke. "Fix your own back, your majesty!" I shouted. I grabbed a heavy stool and hurled it through the back window. Glass shattered. I didn't look back. I vaulted over the sill, landing in the alleyway, and ran. I ran until my lungs burned, leaving the king and my heart behind in the smoke. The silence in the palace was louder than the screams on the battlefield. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. My hands were shaking, not from the poison, that was fading, leaving behind the hollow, aching emptiness, but from the withdrawal. I hadn't seen her in 3 days, 72 hours. My skin felt tight. My wolf was pacing in the back of my mind, scratching at the walls of my skull, whining for her. The scent of antiseptic and lavender, the sharp sting of her voice, the way she touched me, like I was a problem to be solved, not a god to be worshipped. "Sire?" I looked up. Cale was standing in the doorway, holding a tray of food. He looked worried. A perfect, loyal beta. "You need to eat," Cale said softly, placing the tray on the nightstand. "The council is asking for you. They want to discuss the border skirmishes." "I don't care about the border," I rasped. My voice sounded wrecked. "Where is she?" Cale sighed, the sound of a parent dealing with a petulant child. "The enforcers are sweeping the city. We'll find her, Silas, and when we do, she'll pay for what she did to you." He poured a glass of water. She played you, brother. She saw a lonely king and she dug her claws in. The poison. It was all her. I looked at the glass of water. The fog in my brain was clearing. The distance from the toxin was giving me clarity. I replayed the moment in the clinic. The fear in her eyes. The way she had tackled me into the closet, not to hurt me, but to hide me, to save my dignity. Would a poisoner protect my reputation? She smelled the flask, I muttered. What? Kale asked, freezing mid-pour. She smelled the flask, I said, looking up. Before you even walked in the room, she knew. She planted it, Kale said quickly, too quickly. No. I stood up. The movement was fluid. The stiffness was gone. My rage was back, but this time it was cold, focused. She threw acid on the floor to escape. She didn't try to kill me. She tried to get away from you. Kale took a step back. Silas, you're not thinking clearly. The withdrawal. I'm not withdrawing from the poison, Kale. I growled, taking a step toward him. I'm withdrawing from her. I sniffed the air. Underneath Kale's expensive cologne, I smelled it. Faint, old, but undeniable. Sulfur. It was coming from his pores. You've been handling it, I said softly. The wolfsbane. Kale's face went pale. He reached for the gun at his waistband. He was fast, but I was the king. I didn't shift. I didn't need to. I moved like a shadow. I caught his wrist before he could draw the weapon. I squeezed. Bone crunched. Kale screamed. Why? I asked, looking into the eyes of the man I had trusted with my life. You were weak. Kale spat, wincing in agony. Obsessed with peace. Obsessed with that doctor. The kingdom needs a warlord, not a patient. You're right, I whispered. I twisted his arm, forcing him to his knees. I have been too patient. I didn't give him a trial. I didn't give him a speech. I snapped his neck with the same efficiency Beatrix used to crack my back. Kale fell to the floor. I stepped over him. I didn't feel sadness. I felt urgency. Guard! I roared. The door burst open. Get the car! I ordered, grabbing my coat. We're going to the clinic. Sire, the clinic is abandoned, the guard stammered. I know, I snarled, my eyes glowing gold. But her scent is there, and I am going to hunt down whoever took her. I paused at the door, looking back at the body of my former friend. And if anyone else stands in my way, I promised the empty room, I won't be as gentle. Chapter 13. I woke up with a headache that felt like someone was using my skull as a bongo drum. My hands were tied behind my back. My ankles were zip-tied to the legs of a heavy metal chair. The smell of damp concrete and rust filled my nose. Finally, a voice sneered. I opened my eyes. I was in a warehouse. Classic kidnapping venue. High ceilings, flickering lights, ominous water drips. Standing in front of me was a man I recognized from the tabloids, King Valen of the West. He was older than Silas, with graying hair and a posture that made my chiropractor instincts twitch. King Valen, I rasped, my throat dry. You really need to adjust your lumbar support. You're leaning heavily to the left. Is that why your invasion plans always fail? You can't walk in a straight line? Valen's face darkened. He backhanded me across the face. It hurt. My lips split. But I didn't cry. I tasted copper and spat it onto his polished shoe. Feisty, Valen laughed coldly. I see why Silas likes you. He always did have a taste for difficult women. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. You're going to help me, Doctor. Kale failed to kill him slowly, so now we're going to do it quickly. You're going to mix a new batch of the toxin, a lethal dose. I left my chemistry set in my other pants, I said dryly. Also, go to hell. If you don't, Valen whispered, pulling a knife from his belt. I'm going to start removing fingers. Surgeons need fingers, don't they? He pressed the blade against my pinky. Start with the left hand, I said, staring him dead in the eye. I'm right-handed. Valen paused. He looked unsettled by my lack of begging. You think he's coming for you? Valen mocked. He thinks you betrayed him. He's probably hunting you right now to kill you himself. Maybe, I said, but Silas has back problems. He can't run very fast. Valen raised the knife. Boom! The entire back wall of the warehouse vanished. It didn't just crumble, it exploded inward, sending bricks and dust flying like shrapnel. Valen stumbled back, shielding his face. Through the dust cloud, a shadow emerged. He wasn't human. Not anymore. He was halfway between shifts, a monstrous hybrid of man and wolf, 7 feet tall, claws the size of steak knives, and eyes that burned like twin suns. Silas. He didn't roar. He didn't speak. He just breathed, a sound like a jet engine intake. He scanned the room. His gaze landed on me, on the blood on my lip, on the zip ties. Then he looked at Valen. You touched her, Silas said. The voice wasn't his. It was the wolf, deep, distorted, and echoing with the promise of violence. Silas! Valen shouted, grabbing me by the hair and yanking me up. He pressed the knife to my jugular. Stay back, or I open her up. Silas stopped. He twitched. He was vibrating so hard the air around him seemed to warp. Let her go, Silas growled, taking a step forward. The concrete cracked under his foot. I'll kill her, Valen screamed, pressing the blade harder. I felt a trickle of blood run down my neck. Silas looked at the blood. He smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. You better do it fast, Valen, Silas whispered, crouching down to launch himself, because I'm going to tear your arms off and beat you to death with them. Chapter 14. Get back, Valen screamed, his voice cracking like a teenager's. He dragged me backward, the knife digging deeper into the skin of my neck. I'll slit her throat, Silas, I swear to the goddess. Silas didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He moved with a terrifying, liquid grace, stepping over the rubble of the wall he had just obliterated. His eyes were void of humanity, just twin pools of molten gold burning in a skull that seemed to be reshaping itself under his skin. Do it, Silas snarled. The sound was wet, guttural, and I will peel the skin from your bones while you watch. Valen's hand shook. The blade wavered against my jugular. That was my opening. I wasn't a warrior. I was a chiropractor. I knew exactly how joints worked, and more importantly, how they stopped working. Valen was distracted by the monster approaching us. His weight was shifted back on his heels, his grip on my arm tight but rigid. I didn't pull away. I dropped. I went dead weight, tucking my chin to protect my arteries. As I fell, I stomped my boot down, hard, on the bridge of Valen's foot. At the same time, I threw my head back. Crack! My skull collided with his nose. Cartilage gave way. Valen shrieked, blinding pain overriding his grip on the knife. He stumbled back, clutching his face. Run, Beatrix! Silas roared. But I couldn't run. My ankles were still zip-tied to the metal chair. I hit the concrete floor hard, the chair clattering with me. Valen recovered fast. He looked down at me, blood streaming from his broken nose, madness in his eyes. He raised the knife to finish me. He never got the chance. A blur of black and gray slammed into him. It was Silas. He hit Valen with the force of a freight train, driving him into the concrete pillar behind us. The sound of impact was sickening, a symphony of snapping ribs. "Silas!" I screamed, struggling against the zip ties. Silas didn't hear me. He was tearing into Valen with a feral efficiency that turned my stomach. Claws flashed. Valen screamed, then gargled, then went silent. It was over in seconds. The warehouse fell quiet, save for the dripping of water and the heavy, ragged breathing of the Alpha King. "Silas?" I whispered. I looked around for something sharp. A piece of jagged metal from the explosion lay near my hand. I grabbed it, sawing frantically at the plastic ties binding my wrists. Silas stood over Valen's broken body. His back was to me. His coat was gone, his shirt in tatters. His muscles were spasming, rippling under his skin, as if snakes were moving beneath the surface. "Silas, it's over," I said, my voice trembling. "We need to go. The police, the enforcers." He turned around. My blood ran cold. The gold in his eyes was gone, consumed by a pitch-black void. His jaw hung open, saliva dripping from extended fangs. He wasn't looking at me with recognition. He was looking at me like I was prey. "Enemy," he growled. The toxin, the adrenaline dump from the fight had accelerated the shift lock. He was gone. The man who liked my bossiness was buried under the beast. The zip ties snapped. I was free. I scrambled to my feet, kicking the chair away. "Silas, look at me," I said, holding up my hands, palms open. "It's Beatrix, your doctor, the one who poked you, remember?" He tilted his head. A low rumble started in his chest, vibrating through the floorboards. He crouched, muscles coiling to spring. "Kill," he whispered. I didn't wait for the pounce. I turned and ran. Chapter 15. I sprinted through the maze of crates, my boots slamming against the concrete. I could hear him behind me, heavy claws skittering on the floor, crates being smashed aside as he plowed through them rather than going around. He was hunting me, and he was faster. "Think, Bee, think," I panted, vaulting over a forklift. I couldn't outrun an alpha. I certainly couldn't fight him. I needed to sedate him. But my medical bag was gone, left in the car or stolen by Valen's goons. I needed a weapon, not to kill, to reboot. I scanned the warehouse as I ran. Pallets of lumber, rusted chains, and there, lying near the door where Valen's guards had been stationed, a dropped stun baton. Standard issue riot control, 50,000 volts. It wasn't a sedative, but it would have to do. I dove for it, sliding across the dusty floor like a baseball player stealing home. My fingers closed around the rubber grip just as a shadow fell over me. I rolled onto my back, arm raised. Silas was mid-air. He looked magnificent and terrifying, a creature of pure violence. He landed on top of me, knocking the wind out of my lungs. His weight was crushing. "Silas, no!" I screamed. He snarled, snapping his jaws inches from my face. Hot saliva splattered my cheek. He didn't bite immediately. He was savoring the catch. His hand, claws extended, pinned my shoulder to the ground. I jammed the baton into his ribs and thumbed the trigger. Zap! Crack! Blue lightning arced between us. The smell of singed hair filled the air. Silas roared in pain, his body arching back. The voltage was enough to drop a horse, but on an adrenaline-fueled Alpha King, it was just an annoyance. He swiped his hand, knocking the baton out of my grip. It skittered across the floor, useless. He looked down at me, more angry than hurt. The blackness in his eyes swirled, thick and suffocating. "Hurts," he growled, confusing the pain with an attack. "You hurt." "I'm trying to save you, you idiot!" I yelled, kicking at his chest. It was like kicking a brick wall. He grabbed my leg. His grip was bruising. He dragged me back toward him, looming over me, his face twisting into a snarl that promised the end. I was out of weapons. I was out of time. I looked into the abyss of his eyes and realized something terrified me more than dying. It was the thought that when he woke up and realized what he had done, that he had killed his mate, it would break him. He would never recover. I couldn't let him do this, not for my sake, for his. "Silas," I said, my voice shaking but loud. He lowered his head, sniffing my throat, looking for the pulse point to tear. I didn't flinch. I reached up. I bypassed the claws, the teeth, the rage. I grabbed him by the ears, firmly, like I was handling a stubborn Great Dane. He froze. The audacity of the touch shocked the wolf brain. I yanked his head down until our foreheads were touching. "Enough," I whispered. The growl in his throat was a chainsaw idling against my chest. He could snap my neck with a twitch. He could rip my face off before I could blink. But he didn't. Because I wasn't fighting him. In the animal kingdom, struggling triggers the predator drive. Running triggers the chase. I stopped doing both. I held his face between my palms. His skin was burning, fever hot. His pulse was hammering against my fingertips so fast I couldn't count it. "Look at me," I ordered. I didn't use my screaming voice. I didn't use my begging voice. I used the voice I used when a 300-pound linebacker was refusing to do his rehab exercises. The voice of absolute clinical authority. "Silas." The name cut through the growl. He blinked. The blackness in his eyes rippled. "You are in my clinic," I lied, keeping my eyes locked on his. "You are on my table, and you are misbehaving." He whimpered, a high, confused sound. "Beatrix?" "Yes," I said, my thumbs stroking the sharp angles of his cheekbones. "I am Beatrix. I am your doctor, and I am telling you to stand down." He trembled. His entire body shook as the human consciousness fought to claw its way back through the toxin. "Can't," he choked out. "The noise, the fire." "Focus on my voice," I commanded. "The noise is a lie. The fire is just chemistry. You are stronger than a chemical, Silas. You are the Alpha King." I took a deep breath. I needed to trigger a somatic response, something his body knew better than rage. "Silas," I said sharply. "Heal." The command hit him like a physical blow. It was the word I used at the gala, the word that had saved him from a fight. It was a word that meant submission, but in our language, it meant trust. The tension in his shoulders snapped. The black drained from his eyes like ink down a drain, leaving behind that brilliant, beautiful gold. He blinked. Once. Twice. Clarity rushed in, followed immediately by horror. He looked at his claws digging into my shoulder. He looked at my split lip. He looked at the position we were in, him pinning me to the cold concrete, ready to kill. "Be," he gasped, snatching his hands away as if I were made of fire. He scrambled back, crashing into a stack of pallets. He curled into himself, shaking violently. "I almost..." He stared at his hands, revulsion twisting his features. "I almost..." "But you didn't," I said softly. I sat up, wincing. My shoulder throbbed, and my head felt like it was splitting open. I crawled toward him. Stay back, Silas roared, pressing himself into the corner. I'm dangerous. I can't control it. You just did, I pointed out. I didn't stop. I crawled right up to him. He looked broken. The mighty king, shivering in the dust of a warehouse, terrified of himself. I reached out and took his hand. It was bloody. His knuckles were split. The toxin is burning off, I said, checking his pulse. It was slowing. The adrenaline spike burned through the rest of it. You're clean, Silas. He looked at me, his eyes wet with unshed tears. I hurt you. I'll bill you, I whispered, leaning my forehead against his shoulder. He let out a sob, a raw, broken sound, and wrapped his arms around me. He buried his face in my neck, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. But I didn't complain. I held him back. I've got you, I murmured, stroking his matted hair. I've got you. We stayed like that for a long time, the silence of the warehouse settling around us like a blanket. Then, in the distance, sirens. Silas stiffened. The king was returning. Can you walk? He asked, his voice rough but steady. I think so, I said. Can you? He tried to stand and immediately stumbled, his legs giving out. I caught him, barely keeping us both upright. He was heavy, exhausted, and completely drained. Okay, I grunted, wedging my shoulder under his arm. Lean on me. We're doing the three-legged hobble, left foot first. I'm heavy, he warned. I lift heavy things for a living, I retorted. Now move your ass, Your Majesty. I have a feeling the press is going to want a statement. And you look like hell. Silas looked down at me. A weak, tired smile touched his lips. Feisty, he whispered. I love you. I froze. He hadn't said it before. I looked up at him. You're delirious. Maybe, he agreed, leaning his weight on me. But I'm right. Delirious, I repeated, hoisting his arm tighter around my shoulders. That's the blood loss talking, and the adrenaline crash. You're currently experiencing a neurochemical flood that mimics affection. It's a survival mechanism. Silas chuckled, a wet, ragged sound that vibrated against my ribs. You just diagnosed my heart with a survival mechanism. You are unbelievably unromantic. I'm a doctor, I grunted, kicking a piece of rubble out of our path. Romance doesn't stop bleeding. Pressure dressings do. We stumbled out of the warehouse ruin and into the blinding chaos of the night. The world was screaming. Sirens wailed, red and blue lights strobed against the brickwork, and a wall of enforcers stood behind a police barricade. And behind them, the vultures, the press. Hundreds of cameras clicked in unison, a mechanical cicada swarm. King Silas, is it true you shifted? Is the West attacking? Silas stiffened against me. I felt the tremor start in his legs, the instinct to fight, to roar, to defend. But he was too weak. If he growled now, he wouldn't look fearsome, he would look unstable, a rabid animal that needed to be put down. Head down, I ordered, shifting my grip to shield his face from the strobes. Don't say a word. Let me handle the sharks. I marched us forward. I was 5'0" in combat boots, covered in dust and blood, dragging a 7-foot warlord who could bench press a truck. But I walked like I owned the pavement. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. Doctor, is the king injured? Is he fit to rule? I stopped. I stared directly into the camera lens with my best "you have a cavity" glare. "The king," I announced, my voice cutting through the noise, "has successfully neutralized a terrorist threat. He is currently suffering from mild exhaustion and requires immediate medical hydration. Anyone who impedes his transport to my clinic will be charged with obstruction of justice, and I will personally bill you for his stress levels." I turned to the nearest enforcer, a terrified-looking lieutenant. "You, get the car. Open the door. Now!" The lieutenant scrambled to obey. Silas leaned his weight on me as I shoved him into the back of the armored SUV. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at me. "My fierce little shield," he murmured as the door slammed shut, sealing us in the quiet dark. I didn't take him to the palace. The palace was full of vipers, ghosts, and dead betas. I took him to the only place where I controlled the environment, the Kross clinic. I spent 3 hours cleaning him up. I stitched the laceration on his thigh. I flushed the last of the metabolic toxins from his blood. I put him in the recovery suite, the one with the reinforced bed, and watched his vitals until the sun came up. When he finally woke, the morning light was filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across the sterile white sheets. I was sitting in the chair next to the bed, reviewing his chart. My own shoulder was bandaged, and my lip was swollen, but I was functional. "You're staring," I said, without looking up from the clipboard. Silas didn't answer immediately. The sheets rustled. "I'm checking for fur," he rasped. His voice was gravel, deep and ruined by the roaring. "I'm checking to see if I'm still me." "You are," I assured him, finally meeting his gaze. "Pupils are responsive. Heart rate is 65. The monster has left the building, Silas." He sat up slowly, wincing as his bruised ribs protested. He looked at his hands, clean, human hands. Then he looked at me. His gaze snagged on my split lip. His expression crumbled. "I did that," he whispered. "No," I corrected. "Valen did that. You broke Valen into spare parts. Technically, you avenged my lip. I almost killed you, Beatrix." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, putting his head in his hands. "In the warehouse? I didn't know you. I saw prey. If I hadn't been bossy," I offered. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "If you hadn't commanded me. You bypassed the wolf and spoke directly to the instinct. No one has ever done that. Not my father, not Kale." He looked up. The gold in his eyes was soft, liquid. "I meant what I said," he told me. "In the warehouse." I froze. I tried to hide behind my clipboard. The delirious rambling? I recorded it for diagnostic purposes, but— "I love you," he interrupted. He stood up. He was wearing a pair of scrub pants I had found in the Lost and Found. They were too short, and nothing else. He walked toward me, not with the predatory stalk of an alpha, but with the steady gravity of a planet. "I don't need a healer, Beatrix," he said, pulling the clipboard from my hands and tossing it onto the counter. "I have plenty of healers. They bow and scrape and give me pills that don't work." He took my hands. His thumbs traced the pulse in my wrists. "I need a check and balance. I need someone who isn't afraid to knee me in the balls when I get arrogant. I need a queen who can look a monster in the eye and tell him to sit." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a proposition. It was a surrender. "You want me to be queen?" I asked, skepticism warring with the flutter in my chest. "Silas, I'm a chiropractor. My kingdom is a spine model and a tube of biofreeze. I don't do tiaras. I don't do court politics." "I'll handle the politics," he promised, stepping into my space, his heat enveloping me. You handle me. Just me. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. Marry me, Feisty. Be my mate. Help me rebuild the council. Help me stop the wars before they start, because you're the only one who can tell when my back is getting tight from stress. It was the most practical, insane, and perfect proposal I had ever heard. He wasn't asking for a trophy. He was asking for a partner, a co-pilot for his chaotic life. I looked at him, this massive, scarred, beautiful disaster of a man who looked at me like I was the sun. Okay, I whispered. Silas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He moved to kiss me, his hands sliding into my hair. Wait, I said, putting a hand on his chest. He froze, panic flickering in his eyes. You changed your mind? No, I said, narrowing my eyes. But I have conditions, non-negotiable terms. If I'm going to be queen, we're doing this my way. Silas blinked, then smirked. The arrogant king was back, just for a second. Name them. 1. I counted on my finger. I keep the clinic. I am not becoming a housewife in a castle. I have patients who depend on me. Done. Silas agreed instantly. We'll expand it, make it the Royal Hospital. 2. I continued. No more wars of aggression. If you want to fight, you fight me. On the sparring mat. Loser does the dishes. Done. He grinned. I look forward to losing. And 3, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You admit, right now, on the record, that I was right about your posture being the cause of your headaches. Silas laughed. He swept me up into his arms, spinning me around the small exam room until I was dizzy. You were right, he shouted, burying his face in my neck. You were right about everything. My back, the poison, the posture. I yield, doctor. I yield. He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive, desperate, and full of promises. Does this mean I get a discount on my next adjustment? He murmured against my lips. Absolutely not. I breathless. Family rate is double. Worth it. He growled. The door to the exam room burst open. Dr. Kross! Maddie, my receptionist, shrieked, waving a tablet. Don't freak out, but the Prime Minister is on line 1, and there is a delivery truck outside with— Is that a throne? I looked at Silas. He looked innocent. I might have ordered some new furniture for the waiting room, he shrugged. Something with better lumbar support. I rolled my eyes. I'm going to need a bigger office. Chapter 18. If you put one more bobby pin in my skull, Maddie, I am going to sedate you. And I won't use the good stuff. I'll use the stuff we give the geriatric wolves with gas. But Your Majesty, Maddie squeaked, her hands trembling as she tried to wrestle a diamond-encrusted comb into my hair. The crown has to sit perfectly. The Archbishop of the Northern Territories is watching. He has a monocle, Beatrix. A monocle. I don't care about his eyewear, I grumbled, slapping her hand away and checking my reflection. I looked ridiculous and terrifying. My wedding gown was a masterpiece of white silk and lace, costing more than the GDP of a small country. It had a train long enough to trip a battalion. But underneath the layers of tulle, hidden from the prying eyes of the aristocracy, I was wearing my broken-in, steel-toed Doc Martens. Because if I had to run, fight, or kick a dignitary in the shin, I wasn't doing it in heels. 5 minutes, a guard shouted from the hallway. I took a deep breath. This was it. The mating ceremony, the coronation, the end of Dr. Beatrix Kross, private practitioner, and the beginning of Queen Beatrix, royal pain in the ass. You got this, I whispered to the mirror. He's just a patient with an army and a crown. But his C4 vertebra still rotates to the left when he's stressed. I kicked the door open. Let's do this. The cathedral was deafening. Thousands of wolves packed the pews, their scents a chaotic mix of anticipation and fear. The air smelled of incense and expensive perfume. At the end of the aisle stood Silas. He wasn't wearing armor today. He was wearing a black ceremonial uniform with gold braiding, medals gleaming on his chest. A heavy velvet cape hung from his broad shoulders. He looked regal, untouchable, a god of war forced into formal wear. But then he saw me. The king mask slipped. His eyes, those molten, golden eyes, widened. His jaw went slack. He took a half step off the dais, as if he wanted to run down the aisle and carry me the rest of the way. I smirked. Heel, boy. I walked toward him. The music swelled. The crowd held its breath. When I reached the altar, Silas didn't wait for the archbishop to start. He grabbed my hand, his grip tight, grounding. His palm was sweating. You look. He swallowed hard, his voice rough, dangerous. It's the hairspray, I whispered back. Highly flammable. Don't stand too close to the candles. The ceremony was a blur of ancient languages and blood oaths. I promised to rule with wisdom. He promised to rule with strength. We cut our palms and mixed the blood. It was primal and intense, the bond snapping into place like a suspension bridge cable. Finally, the archbishop, a trembling old wolf who looked like he needed a hip replacement, raised the heavy gold crown. I present to you, he quavered, King Silas and Queen Beatrix of the Eastern Territories. The roar of the crowd was physical. It shook the stained glass. We sat on the massive twin thrones. The press surged forward for the official portrait. This was the image that would hang in every government building for the next century. Smile, I muttered through my teeth, waving at the flashing cameras. I can't, Silas whispered. His voice was tight, strained. I glanced at him. He was sitting ramrod straight, his knuckles white on the armrests. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. What's wrong? I asked, keeping my smile fixed for the cameras. Cold feet? My neck, he hissed. It's locked, completely seized up. The cape, it weighs 50 pounds, B. I can't turn my head. I looked at his posture. He was right. His trapezius muscles were in full spasm, pulled tight by the weight of the ceremonial cloak and the stress of the day. If he tried to stand up or bow, he was going to collapse or look like a robot. You're kidding me, I whispered. Now? In front of the entire kingdom? Fix it, he groaned, his eyes watering. Please. I feel like my head is going to pop off. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the archbishop. I looked at my husband, the most powerful predator on the continent, who was currently being defeated by a velvet cape. I sighed. Unbelievable. I stood up. The crowd gasped. I wasn't supposed to stand. I was supposed to look ornamental. I turned to Silas. Scoot forward. What? He blinked. Scoot. Forward, I ordered, my voice projecting in the silent cathedral. Silas obeyed instantly, shuffling to the edge of the throne. I stepped behind him. I kicked my heavy train out of the way, planting my combat boots firmly on the dais for leverage. Your Majesty, the archbishop squeaked, stepping forward. What are you doing? The protocol. The king has a subluxation at the C2 level, I announced loudly, cutting him off. If I don't correct it, he's going to be grumpy at the banquet, and nobody wants a grumpy alpha. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. I placed my hands on either side of Silas's head. His crown was in the way. Hold this, I said, taking the crown off his head and tossing it to the horrified archbishop. I wrapped my arm around Silas's forehead, bracing his neck. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Relax," I murmured into his ear. "Drop your shoulders. Let me have the weight." "You always have the weight, Bea," he whispered back, closing his eyes. "You're the only one strong enough." I smiled. Deep breath. He inhaled. The entire cathedral watched, mesmerized. The King of the East, the Butcher, the Warlord, submitting completely to the small woman in the white dress. And out. As he exhaled, I twisted. Fast. Hard. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, louder than the organ music. Half the front row flinched. The archbishop dropped the crown. Silas let out a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, rumbling groan of pure, unadulterated ecstasy that was entirely inappropriate for a church. He slumped back against the throne, his head rolling loosely on his neck. His eyes fluttered open. The pain was gone. The tension was gone. He looked up at me, standing behind him, shaking out my hands. The crowd was dead silent, unsure if I had just assassinated the king or saved him. Silas slowly stood up. He rolled his neck, the movement fluid and powerful. He picked up his crown from the floor, dusted it off, and placed it back on his head. Then he turned to the cameras. He reached out, grabbed me by the waist, and pulled me flush against his ceremonial armor. He looked at the lens, then down at me. A wicked, devastating grin spread across his face. "My queen," he announced to the world, his voice booming without a microphone. "She has magic hands." He winked. "And a terrible bedside manner," he whispered for my ears only. "You love it," I shot back, straightening his lapel. "Feisty," Silas growled, kissing my forehead as the flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. "Just how I like it." Quick favor, don't click off yet. If you loved Beatrix's feistiness, you need to meet Dr. Margot Vale. She doesn't check IDs, she checks attitudes. When a massive recruit walks in late, she doesn't cower, she orders him to strip. Now. The twist? He's the Alpha King, and he actually apologizes. Click the video on your screen right now to watch the sparks fly.